Hi, everybody. It's nice to see everybody. I'm John Cavadini, Director of the Institute for Church Life here at the University of Notre Dame. And I'm so pleased to be able to welcome everyone this evening. This evening's event is the first event in a series of events taking place today and tomorrow on the topic, the Church and Islam. To clarify the title of our symposium, we are hoping this evening will not so much give a report on the topic of the Church and Islam, but rather to provide a living example of the dialogue that has developed between the Catholic Church and Islam at the official level at which this dialogue takes place. I don't mean that this event is part of the official Roman Catholic Muslim dialogue, but rather that we have the luxury of having with us this evening two of the most seasoned hands in this dialogue, two persons of the highest eminence and distinction who have been involved in Catholic-Muslim dialogue for many years, and who have the kind of preparation and authority that makes such dialogue possible, and that makes the dialogue itself authoritative, meaning that it really has a claim on representing the official views of each side, and that any progress made is therefore not simply a private matter among individuals, but has bearing for the larger groups involved. Friends, the best interreligious dialogue is a very painstaking and careful and caring matter that will have its more difficult moments because it is not meant to find a compromise religion between the two in dialogue, but it will also have its more exultant moments because an honest dialogue uncovers not only deeply held differences, but also deeply shared riches that may not have been suspected because they were never articulated. It is in this spirit of patient listening, striving for precision, and most of all for understanding, that we go forward with our event this evening. And friends, this is how we'll proceed. I'll introduce Father Samir, our keynote speaker, first, and then he'll come and speak. And then I'll introduce Dr. Gavahi, who's responding, and then he'll come and speak. Friends, we've planned to work our speakers very hard this evening, so I'm not sure if there will be time for question and answer. We've factored that in as part of our morning session tomorrow, but there still may be some time. So if there is, we will have it, but if not, we will let our speakers off the hook. So without further ado then, Father Samir Khalil Samir is a Jesuit priest of Egyptian descent who teaches in Beirut at St. Joseph University and in Rome at the Pontifical Oriental University in Rome. Father Samir is one of the world's foremost authorities on Islamic culture, practice, and thought. He has been a visiting professor at many universities, including the University of Cairo, Georgetown University, and the University of Bethlehem in Palestine. He is the founder of CEDRAC, the Center of Arabic Christian Documentation and Studies in Beirut, Lebanon. He also directs the publication of the collection of texts, sources, and documentation known as the Arabic Christian Heritage. And he is the president of the International Association for Christian Arabic Studies. Father Samir has been involved in Catholic-Muslim dialogue at the highest level, the official dialogue sponsored by the Holy See. For example, he participated in the 2008 Catholic-Muslim seminar hosted by Pope Benedict XVI at the Vatican, and in numerous events since then and before. Father Samir is also a prolific author. One can count an astonishing 500 scholarly articles, although I lost count, on questions concerning Islam and Christianity. And Father Samir is the author of 20 books, including most recently 111 Questions on Islam. In his foreword to the second edition of that book, Father Samir observes, quote, "This volume intends to promote understanding and encounters between Muslims and Christians It aims to provide the groundwork for dialogue, in the true meaning of the word, not as a search for some compromise between these two worlds, but a sincere and unswerving commitment to truth with openness to the other side. Accepting the differences of another group does not mean surrendering one's human, spiritual, or religious convictions. Building society together is certainly possible, but also demanding. And that is precisely why it is worthwhile and rewarding. This is the only way to grow together in wisdom and humanity and to build a future world open to everyone. We can easily see from such a quote why Father Samir's participation has been so highly valued by the Holy See. Father Samir last visited Notre Dame in 2005 when he gave a keynote lecture at a conference at Notre Dame on the Quran. So then we're not really welcoming Father Samir to Notre Dame, we're welcoming him back to Notre Dame. And in that spirit, I know you'll all join me in welcoming Father Samir to the podium as he comes to give a keynote lecture, Pope Benedict XVI and Islam. Father Samir.
Good evening, everybody. I'm not very sure of myself because of the language. I'm not used to speak English. And also because of the argument. It's so large. Benedict XVI does every week over 10 speeches. And how many weeks there are in the last years, I don't know. But it means certainly over 1,000 of speeches. The argument of Islam comes often. Now, I will concentrate on one famous document, his speech in Regensburg. But I will present first what happens before and quote some other documents. I had the privilege to know Cardinal Ratzinger in 1973, when most of you were not yet in life. I wanted to learn German, so I went to Regensburg for 2 months and was learning alone. But then I thought, why not follow the teaching of one of the famous professors, Professor Ratzinger? And I followed then, with his permission, as a free person, I followed him. And at that time, most of this was only for those who prepared the PhD with him. Most of them were coming from South America. And the question at that time was the liberation movement within the church. And so was the discussion. And I remember once came an old student of Ratzinger who was at that time bishop, a Greek Orthodox bishop of Thessaloniki. He followed also, but he didn't say any word. At the end, Ratzinger asked him, "What do you think? You didn't say anything." He said, "Look, I learned more in this Vormittag, in this 2-3 hours. Then in my life, about the structure and the reality of the Catholic Church. And Ratzinger asked him, how? We didn't say anything special. He said, the discussion I followed now, with the total liberty, criticizing the Pope and criticizing different opinions of bishops and of theologians, this I never experienced in my own tradition. We cannot criticize even our bishop, the overbishop, the archbishop who is in Athens. So I have now another idea of the primacy of the Pope. It's not like in the army. It's more a direction to help everyone to be closer to the gospel. And this was for me exactly my feeling. And I discovered at that time Ratzinger as someone who was helping people to think, to use their reason in faith, as in politics, as in ethics, in anything. I think this is, Professor Ratzinger is still Professor Ratzinger, even if he's today, he changed his name in Benedict the 16th. Then I met him a couple of times in conferences. We were in Spain. We directed together also a PhD in Bible studies, biblical studies, with Peter Madros as a student. But then I had the privilege to be in 2005, in September 2005, with him for a thinking, 3 days thinking. Just to explain, and it's connected with our subject. The students of Ratzinger created a group. It's called the Disciples of Professor Ratzinger. Ratzinger Schülerkreis. And I didn't belong to them. Now, a lot of them are bishops of Cardinal Schönborn or others. And they decide every year, they meet every year in September. They decide the argument of the next year. In 2004, because of the evolution of the word and so on, they decided to take as argument Islam and the position and the position of the church toward Islam and the relation between Islam and Christianity. Usually they ask two persons to give inputs. So they asked me as one of them. The other one was Father Christian Troll, Mitbrüder. And so we went. But meanwhile, Ratzinger became Pope in June, in April, I think. And so they asked him if he was still ready to have this meeting. And he said, if you do it in Castel Gondolfo, where he spent the summer, the September time, I could come, because it's closed. And so through the garden, he used to come to us in the morning for 2-3 hours, and then it was enough for him. The afternoon, they did something else. And I spoke there, and then happened that in October, he delivered his famous speech in Regensburg. And people thought that it was connected with the discussion of September and tried to find some connections. It was nothing. He had his own vision. I will expose it after a while. And I said what I thought I had to say. Some people thought I wrote something from his speech, but he writes, he does everything alone. He doesn't need, or it's not because he thinks he's better, simply because he thinks by himself. And he writes everything. I asked his secretary, Georg. He said he never asked me, but if he needs books or something, he brings to him this. Now, before, in 2005, was in Germany the great meeting of the youth, the jam, or like this last year in Spain. And by this occasion, he take advantage to speak to different groups. It was in Köln, in Cologne. So he met also the group of Muslims in Cologne. I start with this, with what he said, some of his sentences to the Muslims there. Yeah, what I will do is essentially try to read from him and to present it, instead of saying what I think, even if what I think could be more interesting, but I don't think so. So, dear Muslim friends, I take only some sentences. My beloved predecessor, Pope John Paul II, once said to the young Muslims assembled in the stadium at Casablanca, Morocco. This was a very famous meeting in Morocco in 85. The young, like you, can build a better future if they first put their faith in God and if they pledge themselves to build this new world in accordance with God's plan, with wisdom and trust. It is in this spirit that I turn to you, dear and esteemed Muslim friends, to share my hopes with you and to let you know of my concerns at these particularly difficult times in our history. I'm certain that I echo your own thoughts when I bring up one of our concerns as we notice the spread of terrorism. I know that many of you have firmly rejected, also publicly, in particular, any connection between your faith and terrorism, and have condemned it. I'm grateful to you for this. And then, terrorist activity is continually recurring in various parts of the world, plunging people into grief and despair. Those who instigate and plan these attacks evidently wish to poison our relations and destroy trust, making use of all means, including religion, to oppose every attempt to build a peaceful and serene life together. The word together, this adverb comes often we will see that. Thanks be to God, we agree on the fact that terrorism of any kind is a perverse and cruel choice, which shows contempt for the sacred right to life and undermines the very foundations of all civil coexistence. If together we can succeed, one, in eliminating from hearts any trace of rancor, two, in resisting every form of intolerance, and three, in opposing every manifestation of violence, we will turn back the wave of cruel fanaticism and so on. So these are the three elements from our hearts, eliminating any trace of rancor. This is connected with the pardon. You say le pardon? Forgiveness. Thank you. To be able to forgive. This is the center of the terrorism is based on unforgiveness, incapacity of forgiving. And there we have speeches of John Paul II and of Benedict. You know that every year, for the first day of the year, there is a speech on peace. This is now a long tradition, I think more than 30 years, that every year, and we have beautiful reflection on that. And this is one very important point. Two, resisting every form of intolerance, to be able to tolerate the difference. It will come in other speech. Three, opposing every manifestation of violence in ourselves, in the family, it's not something between religions. The task, I read other passages, the task is difficult, but not impossible. The believer, and all of us, as Christian and Muslims, are believers, knows that despite his weakness, he can count on the spiritual power of prayer. This is what Benedict is saying to young Muslims. And I like when he says, and we are all believers. It is clear for any Christian that Muslims are believers in the one only God. There is no two gods, the gods of Muslims and the God of Christians. There are different accents, how we interpret God, how Muslims interpret God, how Jews interpret God, but there is only one God, and we all believe in Him. This is a main point of all the declaration of the popes. I hear very often people asking me, do you think that we believe in the same God? I said, certainly. Now, how we interpret within the family, we can have different interpretations, approach. But it doesn't mean that we don't believe in the same God. This is essential as basis for our relation. And he will enumerate what is common, saying we have this and that, and what is different. We have to support what is common and to accept the difference. It's not that I have to change the other. I have to change myself, and the other do the same. This was his first speech, at the end, he says, I affirm that the Church wants to continue building bridges of friendship with the followers of all religions in order to seek the true good of every person and of society as a whole. Past experience teaches us that unfortunately relations between Christians and Muslims have not always been marked by mutual respect and understanding. This is a fact, the history, wars and so on. Like we could say between this country and the other, France and Germany. They had so many battles but they belong now, they work together. It's how many pages of history record battles and wars that have been waged, with both sides invoking the name of God. This is the scandal. It's not the battle. It's fighting in the name of the same God, or each one saying, no, in the name of my true God. This is the real scandal. How many atrocities have been committed in the name of religion? And, you know, we have often, especially with John Paul II, he did tens of times repentance for the mistakes of the church through the history. And then he concludes his speech to the young people, young Turks, essentially, who were there, by quoting an important document of Vatican II, Nostra Aetate, paragraph 3. I read these two paragraphs. The church looks, because this is the basis of our relation with Muslims. The church looks upon Muslims with respect. They worship the one God, living and subsistent, merciful and almighty. All these are terms from the Quran itself. Creator of heaven and earth, who has spoken to humanity and to whose decrees, even the hidden ones, they seek to submit themselves wholeheartedly. Just as Abraham, to whom the Islamic faith readily relates itself, submitted to God. Although considerable dissensions and enmities between Christians and Muslims may have arisen in the course of the centuries, the Council urges all parties that, forgetting past things, they train themselves towards sincere mutual understanding and together maintain and promote social justice and moral values, as well as peace and freedom for all people. These themes, social justice and moral values, are always repeated by the popes when they meet Muslims. We share a common vision of humanity and of mankind with moral values and especially justice, social justice. This is very strong in Islam as in Christianity, at least in principle, as well as peace and freedom for all people. Christian and Muslims, we must face together the many challenges of our time. I will come back to the challenges. And you notice again, together. Interreligious and intercultural dialogue between Christians and Muslims cannot be reduced to an optional extra It is, in fact, a vital necessity on which, in large measure, our future depends. So it's not, some people like to have relations with Muslims, and some Muslims with Christians. They like it. It's not an extra. It's a vital necessity. The reason why I say already now, it will come at the end, it's we have a common mission in this world. This is the challenge here. What is this common mission? We are confronted with a secular community, especially in the West, where people think in a secular way. That means where God has no space in our culture. It's not so clear in the United States. It's clearer in Europe. Here, religion belongs still to the society. Not in Europe. In most countries in Europe, you don't dare to say, I see a lot of youth, they don't dare to say they are Christians. Even if Europe has, if you like it or not, has Christian roots. It's a fact. It's not an idea. But still, it's very difficult to say I'm Christian. And now the problem comes with Islam. You have at least 15 million Muslims in Europe, and they dare to say, sometimes too loud, we are Muslims, and to pray in the street, and so on. It's a conflict. This is one of the greatest challenge in our society. Could we say that spiritual values are essential to our society, or only finance, power? If we look to what is happening, it seems to be essentially finance, military power, any kind of power, sexuality. And every time, I don't have time enough, there is enough time, but it needs more. It's not a critique. It's simply, I'm not able to condense it too much. But in the meeting, when the Pope met for the first time in history, the King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia, some 5 years ago, it was a very brief, they said something which was 6 lines, something like that, but very deep. They touched these points, saying we have in common this challenge that the society, that we have to think at the family, the morality of our life, the justice, peace, and so on, even if we don't do it. But this is the aim. I move to another. Well, I take the text of Regensburg. There are other texts very important, but this was a difficult argument. When, a few weeks later, he came to Regensburg. Regensburg was his city. He is born not far away from Regensburg, 20 kilometers in a village. And he taught in Regensburg, as I said when I was there also. So the title of his speech, he taught in the university, not in a church, not by the bishop. Lecture of the Holy Father, this is the title, in the Aula Magna of the University of Regensburg, Tuesday, 12 September 2006. This was a year later. The title, Faith, Reason, and the Universities. Subtitle, Memories and Reflections. But there is a title, where is it? Yeah. Meeting with the representatives of science. This is the title. So he was there as when he was in his university. That's why he says also memories and reflections. He remembered how it was when they used to discuss twice a year, all the professors and the deans and so on, some essential points. And once they had to discuss whether they will have one professor of theology or two, because the majority is Catholics there, but they are also Protestant. So this was the discussion. And then one of the professors came and say, I can't understand. We are discussing whether we will have one chair or two chairs to study someone who does not exist. God. So what's this discussion? And he started his remembering, just to say it's not typical of a papal speech. It was friendly with his colleagues. And this gives the tone to the whole speech. It was very personal. Now, the idea, I go to another file, but it is in French, unfortunately. Yeah. I analyzed it in the 7 pages of the Pope in 26 pages. Because he says things difficult. This is his problem, I have to say. He is still the Professor Ratzinger, and a German, and thinking, making sentences that you start and you wait until the verb comes at the end. It's they are like that. This is their strength and their weakness. So he spoke really as a professor, not as the Pope, remembering many facts in his life. It has to be taken like that. Professor Ratzinger with his colleagues. The question was reason, faith, and the university. Why? And he was speaking to German professors. Because of what I said of the challenge. The main challenge is secularism. A secular city where you go there. I am a parish priest in Germany during the summer, 2 months. Every year, we have less baptism. Now, 10 years ago in Braunschweig, we had around 70% of Christians who baptized their children. Now it's falling down. In the parish, in the diocese where I go, it's Hildesheim, every year they close around 10 churches. Closed. Because of money, they say. In my parish there, Wittingen, the people, the believers said, we are ready to pay for our church. And they obtained for 5 more years to maintain the church. But the bishop said, we will have to close it. We don't have priests. And I had to run from a church to a church, 30 kilometers, one day here, one day there. And people were ready to take me in car. I don't drive. I have a bike, but it's too much. And so this is the situation. And he is trying to see why we reached this point, and how. And studying the relation between science and reason, faith and reason. Reason is in Greek logos. I say that not because I like Greek, because he is insisting that our tradition, as a Christian tradition, we comes from a Greek gospel, a Greek New Testament, the Greek fathers of the churches, and our thinking the Hellenization of Christianity is a fact. Insisting of the importance of this fact, and said how in the course of history, in Germany especially, but in the whole of Europe, they de-Hellenized the thinking, the country of Hellenization. And that they reduced the contents of the word logos, reason, saying logos and logikos, that is what we can measure. It's rational, mathematics is rational, philosophy is not rational. Everyone knows that. Okay. You are professor of philosophy here. And he says this phenomenon is reducing something essential in mankind. Because if you say faith is something which is not reasonable, science in meaning of physics, chemistry, and mathematics, this is science. So you have to choose. Either or. And this either or means the end of science from one side, because then science is no more connected with ethics, with principles, with values. We see everything which is possible, we do it. We can do an atomic bomb, why not? We can stop the children, the abortion, why not? We can interrupt the life of a person. Okay, it's up to everyone. And everyone is now the last criterion. There is no more common principles, values. So we are going back to barbarian civilization. Is no more civilization. This is his speech. The aim of this is a critique of the Western culture, especially the German culture, and the same could be said for the faith. The faith has no more connection with reason, with logos. So it's for people who are less intelligent. These have the faith as support, but the others has reason. This is not so caricatural. It's a reality which is growing. And he's criticizing that, saying faith without logos is nothing. And science without the deep meaning of logos, which is also spirituality, is nothing. I just give you an example. The word logos, the adjective is logikos. Okay. Now, in the New Testament, it's used twice, the word, by Paul and or once by Paul. But in the brief to the Hebrew, there is something. Paul speaks of an offer logikos. What does it mean? And you offer reasonably. The meaning is very clear. It's a spiritual offer. He says, in the time of the Jews, when we were Jew, we were offering animals, and it was a real offer. Now we offer ourselves, and we offer Christ spiritually. You remember, maybe some of you still knows the old, where is that? Yeah, I say it in memory. In the canon, 5 or 10? 5 minutes. Okay.
As usual.
Yeah. Hanc oblationem, in the canon, the official canon, we have this description of the offer, ratam, rationabilem, and so on. I have taken the different translations. Nobody is able to translate this rationabilem. What does it mean, an offer which is rational? They have not understand that it means spiritual offer. In Arabic, we have the same word. We say, الذبيحة الناطقة. Natiq, well, from logikos, etc., which means spiritual. So this meaning, the critique is for that. And then how comes the Muslims in this? Where is the text? Regensburg. Now, I say it by heart. He is saying in Islam, the theme is, what is the opposite of reason? The opposite, it's not unreason. Violence is the absolute opposition, is not human, is typical of an animal. So violence and faith cannot go together. If in the faith we do as we did in the Middle Ages, or that we use violence in the name of God, this is the biggest blasphemy to God. And he found, reading during his summer, he says that, reading a book, this dispute between Manuel Paleologos, this was written in 1391, the discussion with a mudarris, a teacher, a Persian teacher, like our successor, the Persian teacher, a debate. The debate was which religion is the true one. This is classical in the Arabic tradition and the Muslim Christian tradition. Each one pretend mine is the best. The argument of Muslims for centuries was very simple. We believe in all revelations. God spoke first to Adam and to Noah and to Moses, and revealed himself in the Torah. But then Christ came, Jesus came, and perfected the Torah. With God through him perfected the Torah, and we have some sentences from the Torah who are abolished, mansukha, and other who are new orders, and it's a better religion. And then came the last prophet, Muhammad, and he take the best from the Old Testament, the Torah, and the best from the New, and that's why Islam is the best religion. This is the argument. At that point, the Manuel, the emperor, answered. So what he brought new? He had taken from the two previous testament. The only thing he brought is the permission to use violence in the name of God. And then with this sentence, which is repeated 5 times, violence is unreasonable. That's why is the enemy of God. This sentence comes 5 times in the short speech, which shows that this is the key of the whole speech. The whole speech is against the West. To say we have to change something in our university. The title, remember, is Faith, Reason, and University. In Regensburg, in our German system, we have to change our society by inputting spirituality and ethics. But also, Islam have to change something in his system by introducing reason in the faith and excluding totally violence as unacceptable. And then we will have a dialogue. And the last page of this, if I find it, it's a beautiful presentation of a universal dialogue between cultures. For Benedict, the dialogue is not first a religious dialogue. Religious dialogue comes at the end. First of all is a dialogue of cultures. And in fact, I remember that with the Iranian, I was for years dealing with the ambassador of Iran towards the Holy See to organize together, we want to organize in Qom meeting and so. The Iranians have always said dialogue of cultures and religions, because the theological dialogue is not for you and me. It's for a small group, and it's not helping people. First of all, dialogue of culture found a common culture in the different cultures, found the common principle of religion before entering in Trinity or the prophethood of Muhammad or the divinity of Christ and so on. This is, even between Christians, it's not so easy, or between Muslims themselves, Shia and Sunnah, it's not so easy. So we start at that level, but for that level, we need a vision where rationality is the basis to interpret the Quran and the Bible, to interpret the positivity or not of an action, and so on. And for the West, ethics and spirituality is the basis. So if we accept this position that we need faith and science cannot be separated. since faith and logos, better said, cannot be separated neither in the West nor in the East, we could think to an universal dialogue between all cultures and all religions. And this is exactly the conclusion of his speech in Regensburg. Next year, we could follow the other text of Benedict. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Samir. Friends, I'm pleased now to introduce our respondent, Dr. Abdolrahim Gavahi, who holds a PhD in Comparative Religious Studies from Uppsala University, Sweden, and currently serves as the president of the World Religions Research Center in Tehran. Dr. Gavahi has a long track record of involvement in Catholic-Muslim dialogue at the highest level. He has received and hosted delegations from the Holy See in Tehran, headed by the current president of the Pontifical Council on Interreligious Dialogue, Cardinal Turan. Dr. Gavahi has also been a prominent figure in dialogues with the Orthodox churches, and most recently received a delegation from the Russian Orthodox Patriarchate in Tehran. Dr. Gavahi's distinguished academic career has seen the publication of an amazing number of books, 40 to be exact, at least as I count them. Reading these two CVs, by the way, makes me think I've never done anything. Both in English and Farsi. The titles of some of his monographs will give you an idea of the range of his accomplishments. Dialogue Among Abrahamic Religions, 2009. Ethics of War and Christianity, 2011. Phenomenology of Religions, 2011. The Penguin Handbook of Religion, 2006. And currently in press, Islamic Mysticism, and also another volume, Reflections on the Quran. Dr. Gavahi has also translated into Farsi a number of contemporary classics in the history of religion and culture, for example, Edward Said's Orientalism, Anne-Marie Schimmel's Mystical Dimensions of Islam, and John Hick's Religious Pluralism, and many others. Dr. Gavahi is currently also the head of the Department of Future Studies at the Iranian Academy of Sciences, the Iranian equivalent of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and has served as the Secretary General of the Iranians Engineering Association, the Iranian Chamber of Commerce, and the Economic Cooperation Organization, ECO. In addition to having served 3 terms as Iranian ambassador to the Scandinavian countries and then also to Japan. So one wonders when he had time to write 40 books. He is presently a fellow of many other distinguished cultural and academic societies, including the Iranian Philosophical Society. This is Dr. Gavahi's first visit to the University of Notre Dame, but those who attended the Institute for Church Life's conference this past September, Stories of Practical Holiness, will remember Dr. Gavahi's virtual visit to our campus via Skype. So we're pleased to be able to welcome him this time in person. And Dr. Gavahi has gathered his reflections and response under the title Church and Islam, Challenges and Opportunities. So I know you'll all join me in welcoming him to the podium.
Thank you very much for your introduction, and I should thank the officials of the university and especially Professor Cavadini for kindly sending an invitation. My colleague also, Dr. Rasoulipur, who has helped the trip, and finally I'm with you. I think in fact, with the time we have and at this time of the day, I don't go over the paper or what I have prepared for you, but I leave a copy of it here in case anybody is interested. I have somehow reviewed rather briefly the history of our relations and the challenges and opportunities we have ahead of us. But as far as the responding, I usually do not respond, because when I hear a speech or a lecture, of course in this specific case, I almost agree with everything Father Samir said, and I really listened and reflected and benefited from what you said. And in my heart, I prayed for your long life. Even if there is a point which I'm not specifically referring to this presentation, but even if I hear someone and if there's something wrong or a point which I don't agree with, I don't try to respond, it's people's opinion and all that. I just pray God that I'm not thinking like that or like this. But I have taken some very small notes. As I said, basically I quite agree with what was said. You gave an example of someone raised a hand and said, we are giving 2 chairs to someone who is not existing. I have translated a book by Bertrand Russell, and that's titled Bertrand Russell's Best. And I almost translated it when I was very young, about 45, 50 years ago. And I know Bertrand Russell very well. Someone asked Bertrand Russell in his life that, okay, you deny the existence of God. What happens that if you go to the other side and you pass away and you realize that, there has been a God and you have denied the existence of God. What will you say to the God when you meet him? He says, I will say to God that, sorry, it was too little evidence of you in the world so that I could not believe in you. And when I translated the book, and I was rather young. Since then, I have been thinking that in the whole world, I don't see anything which is not an evidence of God. If one day I meet Bertrand Russell, I will tell him that, how did you not see the evidences of God all over the universe? Everybody, every creature, every human being, every plant, everything is a sign of God. And how did you not see it? And Russell was working and was a very close friend of Alfred North's Whitehead. And my religious teacher, late Allama Jafari, used to call Alfred North's Whitehead the Plato of the 20th century. Alfred North Whitehead was a very religious person, and he has written so many books. I've translated his Adventures of Ideas into Persian. But they separated. At the beginning, I think the Logic of Mathematics is written by both Russell and Whitehead. But afterwards, one of them became atheist and one of them was a very, very firm believer. On this question of, these Abrahamic religions, or the chain of religions in the Abrahamic tradition, I'm a professor of, history of religion and comparative religious studies. Sometimes, the students ask so many, open questions. They say, why God has sent a prophet or a prophet after Moses? Why should have come Jesus and all that? I say, sorry, I'm not God. If you want me to, if one day you meet God, you ask the God. It has been his decision, not our decision. Only in Quran it says, the Jews were يحرفون الكلمة عن مواضعه. It was some sort of tahrif or diversion, or I don't know, inversion, what is the right word for tahrif in English. But it says in Quran only, it says that, the Jews, and of course, as you mentioned, they had forgotten part of the revelation, and, they were not truly practicing it, and الَّذِينَ يُكَنِّزُونَ الذَّهَبَ وَالْفِضَّةَ. For some reasons, God decides to send a new prophet, Jesus Christ. And the same God decides to send another prophet. It's not our decision. And Quran, the only reference, of course, there are so many references in Quran that لَا نُفَرِّقُ بَيْنَ أَحَدٍ مِنَ الرُّسُلِ. These are prophets of God. And all of them are respected. There is no difference, basic difference. لَا نُفَرِّقُ بَيْنَ أَحَدٍ مِنَ الرُّسُلِ. This is in Quran. Or in Quran it says, قُلْ تَعَالُوا إِلَى كَلَمَةٍ سَوَاءٌ بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَكُمْ أَلَّا نَعْبُدُ إِلَّا اللَّهَ وَلَا نُشْرِكْ بِهِ أَحَدًا. You say to the people of the book, the Jews, the Christians, okay, let's come together, and we all worship the same God, and we don't make shirk or polytheism. Therefore, this is the view of Quran. The only ayah in Quran which somehow is in reference to the other traditions in the Abrahamic, chain of religions, is Al-Yawm Akmaltu Lakum Dinukum. And Akmaltu is perfection. Today I perfected your religion, and let me be very clear and specific here that in Quran, for Islam, there are two meanings. A general meaning, anybody who submits vis-a-vis God is a Muslim. As far as we are concerned, any believer is a Muslim. Be it a Jew, a Christian, that's it. And the first prophet and the followers of that prophet who are called Muslims is Abraham in Quran. Therefore, as far as we are concerned, Islam means submission vis-a-vis God. If you accept there is a God and there is the will of the God, which is running the whole universe and all that, you are a Muslim. And also you have a specific Islam or the tradition of Prophet Muhammad, which is the last religion in this chain. Otherwise, Quran is full of verses which says, okay, قُلْ كُلٌّ يَعْمَلُ عَلَى شَاكِلَتِهِ فَرَبُّكُمْ أَعْلَمُ بِمَنْ هُوَ أَهْدَى سَبِيلًا. Everybody is having his own, interaction or way of, religiosity vis-a-vis God. And only God knows who is the best servant of God, who is making the best worship. These are my observations, and I think I have met personally Pope Benedict and once, and his predecessor, Pope John Paul II, twice, and I have met many times Father Turan, and I have never found anything embarrassing as such. Never in our meetings, Therefore, I don't want to concentrate on that speech of Pope Benedict. Okay, but as far as my paper concerned, there is a quotation, I'm also, as you mentioned, I've translated many books of Anne-Marie Schimmel into Farsi, and I have met her many times in her lifetime. She was absolutely a very famous Orientalist and Islamologist. I'm sure you know that Anne-Marie Schimmel has written more than 100 books on Islam and more than 500 articles. More than 500 articles on Islam. Almost from the age of 15, 16, she starts Arabic, studies and then Islamic studies up to when she passed away at the age of, 83 or 84. And she was very fond of Islam. And she has a statement, one of her last books is an introduction to Islam, and which I have translated also that book into Persian. There is, at the very beginning of the book, there is a paragraph which I would like to read it to you. She says, quote from Schimmel, among all the religions, which Christianity had to confront and deal with, Islam was both misunderstood and attacked most severely. For more than a millennium, Islam seemed to be a major, if not the major, threat for the people of Europe. And this feeling has contributed to the fact that Islam and those who confessed it, the Muslims, were regarded as arch enemies of Christian and Western civilization. This is from a book, An Introduction to Islam, which is published by State University of New York back in 1992, and the first page, page 1 of the book. I say this because I think, honestly, on both sides of the camp, we have to change our approach. There is a very famous Iranian poet who says, in Farsi, some of you have noticed, you speak a few words in Farsi. He says, Sohrab Sepehri says, چشمها را باید شست. We have to wash our eyes. Or as Rumi says in Masnavi, the famous Masnavi, says, okay, if you have a dark, eyeglass, you see the whole world differently. We have to change our attitudes vis-a-vis each other. I mean, there should be absolutely no misunderstanding, miscommunication, misconception, let alone competition and rivalry between Islam and Christianity. As Father Samir said, we have so many things that we have to address together. As believers. Okay, it's a great religion, a great prophet, a great book, and there is another religion, another great prophet, another book, and the third one also Moses and the Old Testament, or Torah and everything, as we know. There is absolutely no reason that we spend any time, or let me put it this way, we waste any time to propagate any misunderstanding against each other. We, the believers, which belong to the same community, as we said, is one God and one large community of believers, only under different denominations or names or different traditions. Otherwise, we are all belonging to the same camp of believers in God. As believers, our past history, of course, it has been ups and downs, as you said, wars and everything, but we have not always been very frank and very honest in trying to understand each other. Books are written in the West like Islam Unveiled or the Myth of Islamic Tolerance, or the Satanic Verses, these sort of things. They don't help this sort of process of understanding. We have to try to understand each other. We have to try to promote understanding. What is the benefit of we making any accusations against the Christian brothers and sisters, or the Christians, they do that against us? Of course, violence has to be condemned, ignorance has to be condemned, dictatorship has to be condemned, the human values have to be promoted. This is basically the spirit of my paper, that in the past we have had some bitter experiences against each other. We have written, of course, honestly, in the Islamic world, because any one of you who is familiar with Quran, you know that how much Jesus the Christ. It's impossible that I pass through a church or something and I do not pray even from outside. I have so much respect, you may not believe it, but deep in my heart, I have so much respect for Jesus Christ. He was such a great prophet. And of course, his beloved mother, the Sacred Mary, this is, as a Muslim, and I'm not an exceptional, Muslim, it's a typical Muslim attitude. There is a whole surah, a whole chapter in Quran in the name of the this great Murray, you know, with Surat al-Maryam. And then I think more than 70 ayahs in Quran about Jesus the Christ. This is the lady which is the most admired in Quran. Maryam, by all means, is the lady which is most admired in Quran. This is our attitude vis-a-vis Christianity. Okay, if there have been some fool Muslims, I don't know, at this or that corner of the world who have written some, I cannot recall of any serious book written by a Muslim against Christianity. Okay, there have been some theological discussions. As you said, it is good for the theologians. But on Trinity or these sort of things, but these are very technical theological questions. It's not a matter of our day-to-day, you know, encounter with each other. My paper says we have so much things to do together. Look, we have family problems, we have economic problems, we have social problems, ethical problems, I don't know, environmental problems, and all these things we have to solve together. Almost a quarter of the whole, you know, population on the globe is Christians, more than a quarter, and about the same number are Muslims. Put together, we make half of the population, more than 3 billion, 3.5 billion. That is why when I met Christian representatives from the Orthodox Church, from the Vatican, always say, let us forget about the differences. Let us forget about the past. Let us not waste our time about the past. Each one of us, we have committed some mistakes. But let us make a very meaningful, trustful, cooperative future. And we can make that. We had just so much nice quotations from the Pope, you know. The same thing on our side. You have been to Iran and you know how much we respect our Christian brothers. When they come to Iran, they are most welcome. They go to any place they want and they lecture to any audience they want. And that has been the attitude for those of you who have come to Iran. And still we have been in this process of the revolution and in the Iran-Iraq war. We have had all sorts of problems after the revolution. We have not had been leisure time to spend on these things, but we have been promoting cultural dialogue. You know, our ex-president promoted that, and we are having regular meetings with Western Christianity, with Eastern Christianity, and of course we have also trilateral meetings with Judaism, Christianity. I am participating in it in the last 10 or 20 years, and so this is basically the spirit of what I wanted to say, and I have no such response to make. I only admire what you said. I quite agree with what you said, and I think this is the attitude we have to take vis-a-vis each other. We have to understand each other. We have to promote our valued religious objectives, be it Muslim objectives, Christian objectives, Jewish objectives. And that's all. I think this is the best way, because if I want to go into the details of my paper, I will just leave the copy both in Persian and English here. And I think if there are any questions tomorrow morning, we can address it. Or if you think, I'm available, but I think it's 9:25. We leave the rest for tomorrow morning, if you agree. And I thank you for listening this late in the night. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Friends, we will reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. in the Notre Dame room of La Fortune, and then we'll have a panel in which different scholars from the different traditions will discuss the holiness of persons or texts in the other tradition. Then we'll have an opportunity for question and answer based on this evening and tomorrow. So we'll see you then. And I'd like to thank both of our speakers once again.